Okay, what is up, y'all? This is episode 1 of the Cosmic Abundance podcast, and I am your host, Kat. And I don't. I'm just getting settled, right? I've finally figured out how to record solo podcasts, which is something that I really haven't quite understood how to do for the longest time, because I've been like sitting at a desk trying to perform tasks through the framework of matrix work. And what I really needed to do was listen to what Elena Rose teaches me and do the work when the work wants to be done, and fuck a matrix, right? So yeah, I realized that the trick for me is just to come into a meditative space, come inside my own head, and talk as if I am doing an energy healing session for somebody, or a reading, or the skill of being able to speak from a place of trance with my eyes closed, not channeling, but just reading, has unlocked for me hours and hours of content so far just in the last week. And I think that is it's super exciting, because I have so much inside of me pent up and ready to be released, ready to get out, that sometimes I like start to trip over myself when I begin to speak, because there's just so much that wants to come out. And so when I bring my awareness inside, I know, and allowing myself to slow down as well, and to kind of feel into what is ready to come forward and where to start, and what just what the message is right now, instead of trying to think with my rational brain about what do I want to say right now, because the answer is never coming from the mental, or rarely is it coming from the mental plane. It's usually coming from closer to that. It's coming from the body, or the etheric astral levels. So I just got done recording like a 45-minute podcast, private podcast, that's going to go to my membership, the Cosmic Abundance Collective, the Cosmic Research Collective, where we are really deconstructing human design and bringing the experiment back and sharing our findings in that container. And that ended up being a transmission about the layers of contemplation and how we can change our inner landscape in order to change our outer landscape. And I'm not going to go too much into that in this space, because this is more of a public facing space. Though if you're listening to this, you're already automatically cool, right? Because you're here past the 30-second mark of something that's not designed to be viral, but it's here for those who are deeper diving my content, and meant to be more of a forward facing, more of a brand entry point, as I would say, but rather like a way to, get more of what I have to say without me needing to polish it and perform it for the algorithm, right? Which I do that too, but it's harder, right? Showing your face on camera. This format, where I'm literally sitting in bed, like I'm just chilling, and I'm in my meditative space, and I'm just letting whatever comes come, right? Yeah, so I think what today's message is going to be about is a kind of similar to what I was just going deeper into, but more of maybe an overview of why I do this work and why right now is it's a really fucking hard time to be an entrepreneur, right? I'm not gonna lie. And I am also going to acknowledge my privilege in that I worked in tech for 7 years and I have a partner with a tech level salary. And so I am able to take some time right now and focus on creating what I want to create and not focusing so much on what's going to bring revenue, which I'm hoping that by creating what I want to create, the revenue will eventually follow. But it's fucking hard right now because we're, it's October of 2025, right? We've been continually slammed in, like, if we're talking about the in the time matrix that is on the planet Earth right now, we are all experiencing linear time. Time is not just linear, but we're subjected to this framework where time is thrown off kilter, put into a line, and meant to lead from somewhere to somewhere. That's a bastardization of time. Time is a much more nuanced thing than that. I'm not going to tell you that it doesn't exist because it is very real, but it is not as linear or as concretely rigid as we have been led to believe by from our existence in this framework, right, within the matrix. And this time right now, I actually, where do I want to start with this? With the linearization of time and the well, okay, let's just imagine, right? It's a line, right? What's the definition of a line? It has a start and an end, and it is the shortest path between 2 points, right? On whatever plane you're existing on. Linear time implies that time started, and it implies that time will end. Neither of those are technically true. It also implies that there are no places where time intersects. That is also untrue. Time is much more complex and much more nuanced. I think I already said that. There's multiple dimensions of time, and time is it's kind of emergent property of just the way that things interact. I don't want to get too philosophical into like what is time, but just to share that the way that we perceive time in the Western world, so-called Western world, right, the Eurocentric legacy of the Roman Empire, right, because that's where we are, right, where the logical end. We've taken the Roman Empire to its logical conclusion at this point. And this is a place where we are divorced from cyclic time and only in tune with linear time, right? We have the concept of years, but the years are always meant to be building on top of something. And besides just the year, we are discouraged from exploring any of the other dimensions upon which time loops back on itself and forms cycles. And this is where the study of astrology is so crucial, and why astrology has been made a forbidden subject over the years. And yes, the current taboo about it is part of that legacy of ridiculing people who follow it. Well, I guarantee you that the most elite people in power absolutely study astrology because it's important. Time doesn't just loop back on itself in 1 year intervals. Well, obviously it on the day, on the level of the day, right? The day, the cycle, the spinning of the earth, the rotation of the earth relative to the sun. Then we have the moon, right? The month. But our months aren't even 29 and a half days anymore, right? Our months are 30, 31, 28, 29. That's deliberate, and it's meant to throw us off of our natural rhythms. So coming back into that harmony with the moon is one of the first ways that we can start to break the time matrix, and to start to see the places where time does, where timelines come closer to intersecting. Then we obviously have the cycles of all of the other planets, and that's where astrology and the study of the planetary cycles comes in. That's the bulk of my work, right? But beyond that, we also have deeper time cycles. We have the precession of the equinoxes, that 12,000 year phase in where the poles of the equinoctial plane precesses through the sky, right? Going through the ages of Aries and Pisces and Aquarius and Capricorn and Sagittarius and Scorpio and Libra, right? That is a place that time cycles back on itself as well. And there's longer periods of time, because we can look at the galactic, things on the galactic level. We don't have ways. Oh, that moved something. We don't have ways to accurately measure that from our frame of reference here on Earth. So, do you want to go out? My dog. You want to go? Okay. She's getting tired of me yapping at bedtime. You want to go? You want me to shut up? I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. You want to go sleep upstairs? Go say hi to Nana? You can always come back if you want. Yeah, so there's a reason why we have been cut off from these cycles of time. And that's because we're easier to control when we are unaware. So time has never been linear. We just exist within a framework where people have been trying to linearize it for a few millennia. And the problem with that is that you always exist at the end of time when you are linearizing history, right? Because you can't linearize the future in the same way. You can forecast it, but you can't put it out in front of yourself in the same way as you can linearize the past. And so we're always living in the end times, right? But maybe that's not such a bad thing, right? Maybe letting go of some aspects of history in order to build a better future is worth the trade-off. One of the books that I've read that influenced me the most is a book called The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and the other David. It's written by two Davids, and one of them is David Graeber, and he's the more famous one. And I am in my bed, so I don't have my bookshelf to look at. But I've always been, I think anybody who goes on a spiritual journey, right, you start to fall down these rabbit holes of like information about Atlantis and Lemuria, and like this concept of ancient history, ancient aliens, the star seed, like Earth garden seeding hypothesis, aliens were gods, and all of these things that you watch programs about on the Gaia Network. And not to say that none of that is like that there's no truth to any of that, but that it is it's weaponized and it's propagandized in ways that are not healthy. And we kind of have to eventually transcend that. A lot of those, we can watch Ancient Aliens. I'm not hating on watching Ancient Aliens. It's a fun show, but it's trash TV, right? It's not the gospel truth, right? It's just Judge Judy in a different format, right? So discernment is key, right, in anything. But Ancient Aliens, deep history, deep time, linear time. We're always at the end of time when time is linear. But when we go back in and embrace cycles, and when we start to see history and time as a series of interlocking rings of periods and eras and epochs, the idea, like we become like our perspective just shifts, right? The idea of an apocalypse stops being so scary. Not to trivialize any of the atrocities or any of the like crises that we're currently facing. We are facing many of them, but the reason, this is the work to do to help solve those problems, right? What got us here isn't going to get us out of it, right? We can't out-science our way out of climate change. We just can't. We can't out-capitalism our way. We can't capitalism our way out of climate change, out of genocide. And when we tap into these ancient wisdom traditions, we tap into those deeper cycles of time. We study the astrology of history and the ways that the I Ching predicts the transition of power within dynasties. And we step back and we gain a more expansive perspective on the world. And if you are not if you're not always gaining a more expansive perception, like perspective on the universe, like, what are you doing? Like, seriously, like, I can't help you, just get out of here, right? I'm a gate 54 sun. My archetype is the marrying maiden. I am here to aspire, to ascend, and to help you aspire and ascend yourself, right? So, yeah. So if you're not interested in expanding your perspective and gaining a more complete understanding of the way the universe works, then I don't know how the fuck you found your way into this corner of the internet. So now that they're gone, as if any of them were already here. Yeah. Deep cycles of time as not just a repeating pattern within our historical framework, but as points in which timelines loop back on themselves. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Okay, the dog's back. I gotta close the door after her. Yeah, I'm still yapping. I'm sorry. You need to deal with it. Oh, dog. Juniper. She farted real bad. You just came down here to do that. You didn't want to subject Nana to it. I respect that. I respect that. I will deal with your farts. I'm just... Hi. Yeah. I know. We're talking about cycles of time. You're a good dog. Yeah, so the places where the timeline folds back on itself, it curls, and you can, it's easier for you to slide onto an adjacent timeline, right? Where there's certain times in history or in time where certain archetypes become more accessible. And when I use the term archetypes, I don't always mean like the 12 characters of Carl Jung and the like the 12 archetype framework, though those are also very useful. I'm usually referring to more like historical situations, like things that you would find in the I Ching, which are more like happenings or conditions. But when, like, for example, when outer planets are configured in this sort of way as opposed to that sort of way, right, speaking in general terms, this type of historical happening would be more likely than that one. And it hasn't been very long that astrology has been a published and publishable subject, right? Because the printing press is only 2 Pluto and Aquarius is old. Actually, I think it was developed with Pluto and Capricorn, but it came to prominence 2 cycles ago when Pluto was in Aquarius. And then, of course, the church controlled it. And then the state controlled it. And it's only been since, really the 19th century that we've had real freedom of the press in terms of being able to study and publish like whatever the fuck we want, right? And so we only have a couple of centuries of astrological study on a widespread, like, of course we have the texts of Agrippa and the new translations of the Arabic and Hellenic and Hellenistic and all of that, which I'm not an expert on, like on those aspects of astrology. I aspire to be someday, but we just haven't had the information for that long. And now we are in a place where all of the information is available to us, and the amount of information is exploding constantly. And we need to make some sense of it. And by looking at the cycles of time, we can do that. But I do. So here's something that keeps coming up on threads, especially, is that there is this particularly stupid, that's not quite the right word. I don't want to be so dismissive of it but it's there's a particularly limited viewpoint framework of astrology that's coming out that's called quote unquote true sidereal. And I do want to talk about it for a minute because it has been like this shit is popping up on threads left and right and everywhere. Every time you see somebody who like says, "Oh, I'm interested in getting into astrology," there's always a true sidereal person coming in and saying, "Oh, well, you need to know that the tropical zodiac is false and this is actually the real thing and you should study this because this is where the planets really are relative to the stars, and oh, there's actually this 13th constellation called Ophiuchus and you might actually be it." And it's like, it's not helpful at all to anybody, because when you start to engage with these people and tell them like, "Hey, you know what? Tropical astrologers are aware of the precession of the equinoxes, and the system is designed to be pinned to the equinoxes. Like, it's not designed to be pinned to the stars. This is an Earth-centric system." They get really pissed and they're like, "Well, no, it's actually just it's they double down and they're never open to having a conversation about it, which is a red flag, right? It's a red flag about a cult, right? So it shows a lot of aspects of cults behavior. And it's not that it's wrong, it's just that it's not the only thing that's right? And that is the hallmark of a transition from a tier 1 or a pre-integral mindset and worldview to a tier 2 or an integral mindset and worldview, where pre-integral, every time you have this worldview expansion, this worldview shift where you see like, "Oh, I was so wrong before, I saw it this way and now I can see that it's actually this," you always point back at the people that hold that old worldview and you say, "And this is why you're wrong." And I'm right? And then at a certain point, you gain the ability to look at worldviews as something to be considered and weighed and compared, right? And when you do that, unlock that metacognition skill, then you have the ability to say, "This was useful at this time, and then it ceased to become useful for this reason, and then we adopted this, and then this has been useful for this long, and then we saw that it had these flaws, and so we adopted this, and now this one is running out of its usefulness, and so let's take this aspect of this one and this aspect of this one and this aspect of that one and put them together into this framework that we can now use." And that is that's the essence of integral worldviews. And an integral viewpoint is that I can see the truth in everything. That's a yes and, right? And we hold the paradoxes and we sit with the paradoxes, and we don't have to resolve them immediately, because we understand that truth is relative, and also yet some things are truer than others, right? Polarities exist, and yet there's always a little of the other in each, right? And swinging, the pendulum swings from the left to the right, right? There's the journey of psychic, or like having a spiritual awakening and wanting to study Hermetic wisdom, to getting the that book is the crap. What's the name of the book that everybody's like, oh, you should read this, and then everybody's like, no, actually that's fake, and then you're like, maybe it's actually, you know what I mean? There's like this journey of like discovering a new area of study and feeling overwhelmed by it and also excited, and then getting past that level of having read the books and then realizing that the books were written by humans, right? And then discarding them for a while and then coming back around to them, realizing that, like, yeah, it was written by a human, but they had this and that right, even if they got that wrong. Yeah, so I certainly try to approach the world with an integral worldview. I'm not like, I'm not a Ken Wilber stan, and I'm not gonna like go out and say that I'm propounding integral theory, though I do think that it's the most right thing that I've encountered so far. But it's a very useful framework for assessing where you are and getting to the next step, which is the whole reason you're here, the whole reason you're engaging with my material. And it's the reason I do what I do. Let's see, how long have I been yapping? 30 minutes. Okay, we'll keep going. Just kind of feeling in. It's also good for me to check and make sure that the recording is still going, because I yapped for like an hour and a half last night and only recorded 15 minutes, and that was kind of frustrating. But yeah, so here I am speaking to you about what I do and why. And you know, you are somebody who maybe hasn't bought my book or joined my course or in my membership or any of those things, and you're, you know, maybe kind of trying to decide if I'm somebody who aligns with you, aligns with your values, aligns with your views, and I am creating content right now to help you decide that. Calling in, magnetizing the people who are interested in sitting at the table and listening to what I'm talking about, and hopefully speaking loud enough that all the people who are interested are able to join and sit down at the table. So, and maybe you're inside my free community. Hey, everybody. This is also going to get posted inside of my my Mighty Networks. It's free to join right now, and you can come and join the conversation there. Oh, I remember. Yes, part 2. Okay, part 2 of this conversation about the nature of time, whether history is cyclical. I was talking shit about true sidereal people. But where I wanted to go with this is that, you know, I mentioned we were talking about Atlantis and these deep time ideas. I believe in that. I believe absolutely that we have been here before. Not exactly here, but that there is a longer cycle of time that has repeated more than once on this planet, that has culminated in situations very similar to the situations we find ourselves in. And, you know, mainstream science is going to say, oh, well, where's the archaeological evidence? And I'm just going to say, well, Göbekli Tepe for one, and for another one, like, how much of the planet have we excavated archaeologically? Like, realistically speaking, like, what percentage of the planet have we excavated archaeologically? Like, you're really going to say that absence of proof is proof of absence? That's it. That doesn't work that way. And when enough people have had enough memories and enough like independent and converging, right? Hypnotic regressions and memories and things like that, there's probably some truth to it. And with deep time, with these more ancient cycles, everything has been wiped out, and so everything has to start over again. And like, that's the nature of that 12,000 year cycle, or at least how it has, like, what it looked like this time. Where was this going? With respect to the precession of the equinoxes and the idea of ages that precess, there's a lot of evidence that we've known about this for a long time, like the fact that bulls were the most celebrated figure during the age of Taurus in Egypt, right? So the age of Taurus would have been 5,000 to like 4,500 to 2,500 years ago, or sorry, BC, not years ago, BC. And then came the age of Aries, which was when kings ruled everything. And so when you're saying that, and so then the point where the zodiacs converged, the 0 point, the Aries point lining up with the Aries sign, happened around the time of Christ, right? That is so freaking recent in terms of everything, right? Like, tropical astrology wasn't invented in 0 BC. It just was not, right? We have experienced multiple cycles of tropical astrology, and certainly multiple ages, especially if you look in yeah, lost my I don't know where that was going. Yeah, because I was about to say, especially in the Vedic traditions, but they don't use tropical, they use sidereal, but they have it. It's not there. It's not. Yeah, there's too many different sidereal zodiacs, and so if you're just getting into astrology, just study fucking tropical astrology until you have a reason to study one of the more established sidereals, because true sidereal is a modern invention. I don't even know enough about it, honestly, but I'm repelled by it, so I'm not going to force myself to open myself up to that egregore right now. Even though I know very well how to get rid of egregores, so don't try to come at me. Yeah, that's another whole thing. If you No, actually, enough of my front-facing content deals with the subject of egregores. I don't need to go into that right now. If you're interested in that, you can read my blog, or you can watch any one of my YouTube videos about the corruption of human design. Oh, I remember where I was going with this. Thank you. Okay, now it's coming back. And this, again, personal beliefs, personal as they'll call it, quote unquote, unverifiable personal gnosis, which gnosis is always both unverifiable and personal. So that's a little redundant, but this is my own knowing, and a thought, or this like nugget of wisdom that dropped in for me one day as I was deep in my study of human design was that actually human design was not new when it was received by Ra Urufu in 1987. That it was actually already a thing in the last long cycle, the last deep cycle of history, that they had it in Atlantis. And this has been confirmed to me by my, again, unverified personal gnosis, but one of my spirit team is from, like, directly from Atlantis. Like, he has not incarnated since then, and so that's the most recent embodied knowledge that he has, is of being a healer in Atlantis. And human design as the synthesis of these four systems existed then, and it's not new. A book that I highly recommend is Jesus and the Essenes by Dolores Cannon. And if you're familiar with Dolores Cannon's work, I haven't read a ton of it, honestly. This is the first book of hers that I've read, and since then I read her other book that deals with the time of Christ. Her work is very wide-ranging, but in this, if you aren't familiar with her, she was a hypnotherapist who started encountering past lives and then other sorts of strange things in her hypnotic sessions, and started writing about them. And in this particular case, she encountered, like, in this normal suburban, young woman of Jewish descent, not even a Christian, didn't know anything about the life of Christ, right? Had no knowledge about, historical Jesus, or even really she didn't even really know the story of his life. Like, she was not raised Christian. In this young woman, Dolores Cannon regressed her and found a personality living at the time of Christ, and then eventually came to realize that he had been a teacher of Christ within this community of the Essenes, who were a hermetic enclave of, I think historical sources will tell us that they were all of Hebrew Jewish descent, but the information that she got through this regressed past life kind of contradicts some of the things that we know from history. But the picture that was painted of the way that life, just what was going on in Qumran, the location where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. This is the community that stewarded the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? What Dolores Cannon and her regression subject and a couple other experts that she brought in discovered there is, frankly, just absolutely astounding in terms of its implications for our place in the universe and our place within the cycles of time. Some of the things that stood out to me are that this individual that they were talking to through these sessions was a scribe and a teacher, so he was a rabbi within the community. And so he was, he spent time copying the scrolls and stewarding the knowledge. And it was a lot older than anybody in our mainstream society wants to admit, wants us to believe. He spoke several times about this idea of being the ones to preserve the knowledge from the, like, capitalize the before times. There a few times they also made so there were several times when the line of questioning would make him like clam up and be like, well, how did you know about that? No, I'm not talking about that. And so I like made notes when I was like, as I reread the book the second time, I like went through and I made notes of every time that he was just like, no, I won't talk about that, and kind of put a pin in it, right? Because now we're cooking with gas, right? But he wouldn't talk about any of the connections with others, right? People from outer space, essentially, or like from extra dimensions, like gods, right? Leading you to believe that there were these contacts happening. And the most stunning thing to me, actually there are many stunning things in this book, many mind-blowing things, and I highly recommend. It's not that long. It's a maybe a 200-page book, and it's a page turner. You're gonna love it if you haven't read it already. But the most stunning thing to me is that they had in the compound at Qumran a working model of the solar system with 10 planets. Right? This is in the years around the turn of, like, around the time of Christ, right? 2020, they had a working model made out of metal of the solar system with 10 planets. And he named them. He was like, oh yeah, and Saturn and Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, and the other one was called Juna, I think he said. But he said, oh, I'm not an astrologer, so I don't really know all about all of them. But also the model came from the before times, okay, for one thing. And for another thing, you couldn't come close to it, because if anybody like breathed on it funny and caused it to stop working, there was no way to fix it. So it was forbidden to see, forbidden to touch. But he specifically said that there were 10 planets in it. And right, that kind of shatters a lot of the things that we know about history, right? And that has also been one of the things that has bothered me the most about these theories of deep time and advanced civilizations, is like, they had to have fucking known about Uranus and Neptune and all that other shit out there, right? Like, and they did, right? They did. So when we look at the Kabbalah, one of the most foundational texts on this is the Zohar. And I won't pretend that I have ever managed to read it. I have a PDF copy of it that I have kind of started to make my way through the introduction, and then I've started to get into the actual text of it. But one of the things that stood out to me in the introduction of the Zohar is many of us know that Kabbalah is, or we think that we know that Kabbalah is a closed practice. And that unless you are a specifically trained rabbi of, obviously of Jewish faith and descent, and of a certain level of understanding of the Torah, you are forbidden from studying Kabbalah. And that was true for for a long time. And there's two different ways I could fork this right now, and I want to go off on a tangent about Western Hermetic magic and it being based on Kabbalah, and how Hermetic Kabbalah has become its own thing and not is a distinct thing from the Jewish devotional practice of Kabbalah. But I'm gonna acknowledge that road exists, and I'm gonna stay back on this path. But in the introduction to the Zohar, the translator says that there was a prohibition on teaching Kabbalah to the general public. And also, a lot of the language in the text uses terms that seem to be specific to Judaism and to, and it's in Hebrew and things like that. But that is a misinterpretation of it, and a gatekeeping. And he also specifically says that the prohibition on teaching it was supposed to have expired in the year 1990. And this also struck me as being very, very interesting, because Human Design was received in 1987 and published in 1991. Right at, yeah, it was published within a year of this prohibition expiring, and that was based on writings from when it was written down in the around the 10th century, I believe. No, sorry, second century. Yeah, so there was a more advanced civilization in the time of Atlantis. They had knowledge of the 10 planets. They had knowledge of tropical astrology. And they had knowledge of all of these systems. The energy body, the I Ching. I Ching is just a binary code. It's not like culturally Chinese in any way, other than the fact that that's the culture that discovered it, wrote it down, was given it to steward. And so my hypothesis, right, and now we're venturing off into like Kat just like running their mouth and like fully just off the rails of my own train of thought. But I have, like, I think that the evidence is strong that Human Design existed then, and then it was pulled apart into these 4 systems, and these 4 systems were stewarded by separate lineages, right? Kabbalah was given to the Hebrews, tropical astrology was given to the Greeks, and then the European and Islamic worlds, and I Ching was given to the Chinese, and the chakra system was given to the Hindu culture, right? The Vedic culture, and it was never meant to be. It was. There's a lot of stuff in the Revelation and in Rotru's vast library of ramblings about it, about how this synthesis correlates with, like, there's evolutionary milestones that that humans collectively hit as different planets are discovered. And so there's the planet, when Uranus was discovered, we evolved into being 9-centered beings, and we're going to be 9-centered beings until we turn into 11-centered beings, supposedly in 2027, right? I don't necessarily, I haven't gone deep enough into his body of work to really know whether I think that that's something he made up, or if that's actually part of the original transmission. All that we can be sure of as being part of the original transmission, by the way, is what he published in 1991. And that also included a lot of his interpretation. But I do also think that there are other aspects that he shared later that were part of the original transmission. Things like variable, that idea of color tone base, like he didn't think of that. Like that's that was part of it, had to have been. But the prophecies are so easy to weaponize and to control, and so I don't know how I feel about a lot of that, like 2027 stuff. I kind of take it or leave it, but we do see from in our historical astrology, we do see that there was a pretty pronounced shift in psyche and culture around 1780s. And because we're in a Pluto and Aquarius era right now, it's easy to look back on that time and say, oh, this was, because we're at a part of the spaghetti bowl where those two spaghetti strands kind of come really close to each other. But it's an explosion of knowledge and revolutionary thinking and thought. And the way, like, the archetypes of the planet Uranus become the outermost edges of the psyche, right? So we've spent, 1700 years with just the classical planets, or even, actually even a couple millennia before that, right? From the beginning of recorded history in this cycle, right? We've had these planets end at Saturn, right? Saturn's the outermost. Saturn is the limits, the concrete edge of reality. And then we get Uranus behind it, and there's like this lightning bolt of electricity that says, oh, there's more. And it's correlating with the discovery of electricity, right? This uprising and revolution, this like upwelling of the human spirit that happens around this time. And then we observe Uranus for a few years, and we're like, hey, this doesn't quite move the way we would expect it to if it was just on its own out there, and maybe there's something else past it. Yeah, it seems like there might be something else past it, but and then in true Neptune fashion, it took another 100 years to fucking pin it down, after, even though many times it had been this close to being seen and that close to being seen, and actually fucking Leonardo da Vinci saw it and drew it and just didn't know what he was seeing. But then we finally, like, we get some some like mathematical and like like there's this like worldwide effort by astronomers and physicists to predict whether there is another planet and where it might be, and then it finally is found. And then we have Neptune, and we get the Romantic era, right? We get this change again in the human psyche to encompass this more, like, if Uranus was like revolution, let's do it, let's make the changes, Neptune was more like and things harmonize back together, but in weird ways that we can't quite explain, and allowing for this more magical and mystical and spooky and Edwardian and all of these things, right, on top of this. Yeah, and so Neptune now exists as the outermost planet, and then we discover Pluto, And we discover that atoms don't, like, the concept of the atom, which is supposed to be the unbreakable, like that's what the word atom means, is that it cannot be cleaved, is broken. We cleave the atom, right? We discover Pluto. Another huge disruption, right? Physics goes from being almost completely solved to being really completely not solved at all. And we're given this Promethean force that we can weaponize, of course, and we will, and we do, because humans. But it's another paradigm shift, right? And that Plutonic awareness existed until the early 2000s, when we started discovering all of the other Plutinos, things like Eris and Orcus and Haumea and Sedna and all of the other planets out past Pluto that are smaller and longer journeys, but yeah. Oh, excuse me. Just checking the time. I've been yapping for an hour, so I think I'm going to start to wrap this up. But really, this is when we learn how to observe and correlate where we are in those cycles of time, those places where the timelines come closer to each other in the bowl of spaghetti, and when it's easier for us to move from one timeline to another, if that's what we want to do, things kind of start to they meld across the timelines in these points. And learning to take a more expansive viewpoint, even of yourself and of everything in your life, and realizing that while you appear to be something that can be modeled as a point, right? A three-dimensional object with boundaries. If you take a longer view and if you take a long exposure, or just watch your location on a map, for example, you really start to see that you do have wave behavior. You're a fiber, right? You're not a point, you're a line. And you're a line that loops back on itself and twists and turns and is knit together with every other fiber on this very interesting planet, in this very interesting solar system, in this corner of this galaxy. And it puts things in perspective, and I was able to clearly articulate why this work is so important right now. Like I said at the beginning, I'm recording this in the beginning of October of 2025. Right now, it feels like the end of the world, but that's because we're looking at the world through a linear time. We are at the end of some cycles, many things are going to die, but we're also here to bridge over to the next, and to start the next cycle and begin the next world. And what kind of world do we want that to be, right? And when we take the long run, the long view, and we stop seeing ourselves as individuals who need to protect ourselves at all costs, and start to realize that there is a larger whole to which we are ideally not subjugated, but rather co-creating. These problems that we see in the world stop feeling so overwhelming and start feeling like something that we just have to take care of. And yeah, I'll just close by adding a little note here about what's going on in the world right now, because this past Friday, yeah, just yesterday actually, was Yom Kippur in this cycle, the Day of Atonement, and that was the day, the night, the nightfall, and then going into the day where the global Sumud flotilla made its closest approach to Gaza, and with the intent to deliver aid and break the siege of Israel upon Gaza, where they are committing the most egregious genocide of modern times. Not that it's the worst genocide, which I hate that we have to clarify this. There have been many, many more lives lost in Africa, Congo, Sudan. Acknowledging the trauma and the horrible things that have happened there does not take away from what's happening in Gaza right now, because of the complicity of the entire world in this. All of them. Yes, yes. And I'm anti-genocide. I'm just going to put that out there. And I think if you're apologizing, if you're justifying genocide to yourself, you need to do some self-reflection. But what just happened in history, in this moment in history, is that for the last 2 years, almost exactly, the settler colonial state of Israel has been systematically trying to, well, more than 2 years, but 2 years since there was a singular attack that made Israel become just like go off the rails, and try to wipe Gaza off the map. But yeah, over the last month, a flotilla of 40 something boats, 500 people, have been traveling towards the ports of Gaza, towards the shores, with boats filled with diapers and baby formula and medicines and water and rice and like aid, literally aid, medical supplies, all of the things that have been systematically denied to the people. And they came extremely close before they were all intercepted. And some have been released, and most are still being held in the Israeli prison system. A lot of people on social media, on Threads especially, have been there have been a lot of feelings about it, right? People are looking at these people as heroes, putting them on pedestals, saying, oh, wow, I could never do that. Or also saying, sign me up for the next one. I need to do that. And I think that there's a very real possibility that Greta Thunberg is going to receive the Nobel Peace Prize this year. And I hope she does, because, or maybe not, I don't know. Oh, yeah, it's October. She might get the Nobel Peace Prize like next week. I'm just saying. Do they do the Peace Prize in October? I know they do the other ones, but yeah, just acknowledging this moment in history and the fact that, here I am selling courses on human design and a membership and a book and things that look on the surface to be unrelated to what's going on and making the world a better place. But I hope that you've gotten a little bit from this, and if you've made it this far, like, thank you, amazing, you're phenomenal. But I hope that you understand that this is a part of the great work for me, and that by creating this content that restores this framework that I believe is a system for self-empowerment that has been twisted into a system for kind of controlling and kind of dumbed down and watered down and really nerfed. This is my way of getting into people's minds and helping them grow their worldview and grow their self, their capacity for agency, right? Trying to break enough people out of the matrix, like literally, like shake them awake and say, hey, like you are worried about paying taxes and putting food on your table and raising your kids, and I'm worried about that too. But I'm also worried about climate change and billionaires and genocide. And let's like take a longer view and see that if we want this planet to be habitable for much longer, we need to stop killing each other, and we need to stop hoarding wealth, and we need to be more giving and more sharing. And we need to look at each other as cells within the body and not as enemies, because underneath it all, we're all just fractal aspects of the same source consciousness. We've got different meat suits that we wear, different sets of memories and different sets of tendencies, and we can kind of understand our meat suits and our tendencies and our like perspectives, experiences better when we have access to these frameworks like human design and astrology and I Ching and Kabbalah. And so, just to kind of wrap it all up, this is why I do what I do, even and especially right now in this time. And if this resonates with you, just know that this is the tip of the iceberg. This is a little bit of my front-facing content. This is something that I created to be out there for people to find. And I go a lot deeper within my closed containers. So I hope that you will consider buying my book, seeing if my course seems interesting to you, or joining my membership, because those are ways that you can support the work that I'm doing, and also ways that you can empower yourself more. Yeah, so with that, I will say good night and good luck.